Okay, we're going to move on to our speaker. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you tonight from the traditional lands of the Wewakai Nation on Quadra Island. I actually met Janie here on Quadra Island when she did this presentation, and I was so just enthralled by the whole presentation that afterwards I went and very bravely asked her, would you consider doing this for Nature Vancouver? I just knew that we wanted to bring it to our audience. And she said, yeah, I'd consider that. So pleased to have you here tonight. Just a quick introduction. At the age of 9, Janie Wray first heard a recording of a humpback whale singing. This emotional moment inspired her to understand the behavior of whales. As an adult, her dream was to work with like-minded people and build an off-grid marine research station in a whale-centric location with few people. In 2001, with the permission of the Gitga'at First Nation community of Hartley Bay, Cetacea Lab was built. In 2017, the Finn Island Research Station became Janie's home base, where she works with students and volunteers. For more than 20 years, Janie has studied the acoustic dialects and social connections of whales. Her work was the subject of a 2019 National Film Board documentary called The Whale and the Raven. Maybe some of you saw it. It played at the Film Festival Theatre. It's been on CBC. Anyway, maybe you've seen it. She'll tell you more about this stuff tonight. Janie is the CEO and lead researcher for BC Whales, a nonprofit whale research organization, and we are so pleased to have you joining us tonight, Janie. So over to you.
Thank you. Okay, wonderful. Well, good evening, everybody. Yeah, it's just a pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to talk to you about whales. And I will start by sharing my screen. All right, well, thank you. Thank you so much. It really is a pleasure to speak to everybody tonight. You've already heard a little bit about my background, but I just wanted to emphasize that it was 25 years ago, my partner and I at the time actually traveled up the coast in a little liveaboard boat, and we landed in the First Nations community of Hartley Bay, which is Gitga'at First Nations territory. And at that time, we spoke to the hereditary chief, and his name was Johnny Clifton. He was already in his 80s at that time, and we asked for permission to build a whale research station within their territory. And not only did Johnny and the entire community welcome us with open arms, they actually shared with us their historical knowledge of whales and actually helped us in regards to choosing the perfect location to study whales, because one of the things we wanted to do was to be able to study whales within their habitat and not spend as much time on the water, but try to be a little bit land-based, so we wouldn't have such an impact on their daily lives. So that was Cetacea Lab in 2001, and then 2017 is the Finn Island Station, which is what you can see here. This is the Finn Island Station. But I tell you what, it started off really tiny. It was literally just this big to start off with. But over time with funding, we've grown, and we now work directly with the Gitga'at, and as well WWF Canada is also a part of this project and when it comes to acoustics. From this station, we do a lot of acoustic monitoring. I'll definitely dive a little more into that. We do land-based scans, vessel marine surveys, and drone surveys. I'm going to talk to you about orca, fin whales, and humpback whales, with an emphasis on humpback whales because they are my heart whale, and they are the ones that that we study the most in that particular region. And this is a picture of Finn Island. It was taken with a drone, and as you can see, it is extremely remote. There are no buildings, no roads. There's this tiny little station that you can see down here. And if I click again, you can see the station. That's the station. So the only way you can get there is by boat, but it is in real whale habitat. On a daily basis, we're seeing humpback whales, fin whales from shore, which is almost unheard of worldwide. And on those lucky days, we also will see orca. So everything is happening from this station, which, just so you know where it's located, if you look up here, this area right here, it's right in there. So we're very close to Kitimat. And then if you zoom in, Kitimat is up here, and we're way down here, very close to the community of Hartley Bay. So from the station, as I said, we do land-based scans. And the way that we're able to actually achieve that is we bring students in worldwide. We have applicants that come from all over, and they're usually students that are in university, but it doesn't always have to be a university student. We want to share this experience with anyone that's just really motivated and conservation minded. So every day, 9 times a day from the station, we do a 20-minute scan. And when we're doing that scan, we are documenting every whale species, every marine mammal, but we're also documenting all of the vessel traffic, because BC-wide, we're beginning to understand that vessels do have an impact on whales. So we want to know how many vessels are out there and how many of those vessels are actually around whales. We do marine surveys. And we have quite a range. We actually go all the way from Hartley Bay, which is up here, and we travel all through here, and we go all the way down to the First Nations community of Clem 2, and then down in around Bella Bella. And during these surveys, we do different types. We do opportunistic, meaning we just go out where we know where the whales are, because we actually know where the hot spots are now. And during that time, we document who's there, what they're doing. But we also do what's called line transects. So we have effort, which equals abundance, and then we can really specify habitat use and the actual abundance of whales in specific areas along the coast. This topic, drones, has it's really changed so much for us. So we started a drone project back in 2018 with one of our PhD students. So she actually introduced us to this idea of using drones to study whales. And it's given us this whole different view, because now you have this bird's eye view where you're seeing whales from a completely different perspective. And it's really changed our ideas of how whales behave on the surface, different travel patterns. One of the key things we're able to do now with a drone is that when we're looking down, so we can be up quite high because these drones all have a zoom component to them. So we're not having an impact on the whales. 99% of the time, these whales do not know the drone is in the air. If we do have a reaction from the whales, we stop the survey and we just fly away, because we don't want to have an impact on these whales. But humpback whales and fin whales are not reacting to these drones, probably because we're up so high. So from this bird's eye view, looking down, we can actually get photographs of the body of a whale, and it allows us to have a better idea of the health of the whale, the size of the whale. We can look to see if the whale has any scars from an entanglement or from a vessel strike, and we've been cataloging that now for 3 years. But another project that we started back in 2019 is collecting blow samples. So you see up in this corner here, here's this drone. It's got these little petri dishes. And what Aideen here, what she's been doing is she's been flying the drone through the blow of a whale, which is 20 to 30 feet above the whale. And what she's able to do with that blow, so that would be like us getting a swab. So from that blow sample, she's collecting all of this amazing genetic information. And from that genetic information, we are just now beginning to realize that a lot of these humpback whales and fin whales have very strong social bonds, but those social bonds are connected to some whales being related to each other. And I'll speak a little bit more to that, but this study has really opened up our eyes in regards to the body condition of whales, and also who's related to, and perhaps why some whales are hanging out with other whales more than others. And the surface behavior, I think I'll talk a bit more about that as we go through the presentation. So even though we are looking at all of the physiology of whales, we're looking at whale behavior, we're looking at surface behavior, we're looking at habitat use. But what's really true to our hearts is whale communication and how these whales are connected to each other, especially through sound. Every whale on this planet has what we call an acoustic fingerprint. So when you study whales, and if you're listening to whales, as soon as you hear a call, you actually will know whether you've got an orca, a humpback, a fin whale within BC waters, but that would also be true for gray whales, sperm whales. All whale species on this planet have a very specific acoustic fingerprint, is what we refer to it as. So because whales live in a world of sound, they are an extremely acoustic creature. We recognized very quickly that if you want to study whales and if you want to understand whales, you need to listen to whales. So what we've done is we've started installing these hydrophone stations along the entire coast of BC. And what a hydrophone is, you can see it right here. It's literally an underwater microphone, and it's stabilized on this platform here. And then where the hydrophone is, there's actually a cable. So this hydrophone is about 20 to 30 meters underneath the water, and it's just sitting on the ocean surface here on the floor. And this hydrophone is connected by a cable. This cable is then running all the way up through the intertidal zone here. And then when it gets to land, that cable is connected to an equipment box. And in that equipment box, I won't go into what the electronics are, but they allow us to listen and record to every sound under the ocean. And in that equipment box is also battery powered, completely off grid. So we also have solar panels. So the solar panels are powering the batteries, and the batteries are powering the hydrophone. From land at many of these stations, we actually then transmit all of the sounds under the ocean back to a land-based facility, for example, the Finn Island station. And I can't even emphasize what a great tool this is. There's no impact whatsoever on the whales, and you can document what type of whale it is. Sometimes you can document the behavior, and you can document the actual habitat use. So this is looking at the entire coast of BC. And what we did in 2018 is we started what is now known as the BC Hydrophone Network. And what we did is we reached out to a lot of NGOs that were already interested in acoustic monitoring, but we also reached out to a lot of Indigenous communities that were interested in monitoring their particular territory. So we went to each of these communities, we spoke with council and with the community, and we talked about this idea. And what we did is we started installing these hydrophones for these communities through a DFO grant, which was incredible. So now what we've actually accomplished is we have hydrophones all the way from the north coast and all the way down to the south coast. And each one of these little circles you see is a hub of multiple hydrophones. And each one of these hydrophones now belong to each one of these partners. So even though we are managing the project, the data collection and the hydrophone and all of that does belong to the partner and not to ourselves. We just try to help everybody collect the data. And then what we did is we developed an algorithm, and that algorithm is now being used as a whale detector. And that all of that information is funneling through all of that acoustic data, because when you're collecting acoustic data 24/7 every single day of the year, that's a lot of data, and you don't want to have to go through that manually. So what this detector will do is it'll take out all the whale calls, and it'll take out all the noise metrics, and then we developed a dashboard for each individual partner. And so now they can go onto their dashboard and they can look at whale presence within their territory or their research area, but they can also look at ocean noise levels. And that's a really important thing to do nowadays, because worldwide, the amount of noise pollution that is occurring is, well, you can just imagine. I mean, if you're living in Victoria or Vancouver, you're seeing these large vessels, and those large vessels are creating a lot of underwater noise. Back up at the Finn Island station, we're doing something a little bit different. So the Finn Island station is located in one of the areas that has been documented as pretty much the quietest place along the coast of BC, and probably one of the quietest places in the whole world. It is a very, very quiet place. It's probably one of the reasons that we have such a high abundance of whales, because it's an area that enables them to communicate and listen to each other. Because as I said, and I can only emphasize, these whales live in a world of sound. They use sound in the same way that we use our eyesight. They're so dependent on communicating with family members, developing bonds, and foraging and finding prey by using sound. So in this particular area, which is close to Hartley Bay, Finn Island Station, starting in April, this whole underwater soundscape is about to change, this whole area right here. Because what's about to happen is these LNG tankers are going to be coming right through here. They're going to go right past the Finn Island Station, and they're going to travel all the way up to Kitimat. There'll be 2 transits a day, because you'll have vessels going up to Kitimat and vessels coming back down. So what we did a few years ago when this was first proposed is we set up 4 hydrophones, and I'm just going to them with my mouse here. And each one of these hydrophones is able to listen to each other. So what that means is that when a whale is vocal in this range here, we can actually, what we call, localize the exact position of that whale while it's vocal. So now not only do you know that there's a whale present, you know the species of the whale. Now you can start to document how many whales you have and their travel route. So, you know, like when you go through the forest and you can see them, maybe there's some deer trails, or the trails that we're making ourselves, and you can see that, you know, these trails are pretty consistent. Well, now what we realize is that whales also have trails, and they're acoustic trails. So for example, this one right here, which is blown up right here, this is a group, two families of northern residents. They traveled past the Finn Island station, and every time they were vocal, this little trail would come up on our screen back at the Finn Island station. And so that was really the first time it happened. We were like, oh, that's really interesting. Oh my gosh, this is great. Now we can actually document their exact travel route. But then what we began to realize is that they kept taking the same route over and over. So we realized that even though we can't see it underwater, they do have very specific pathways that they're taking. And this kind of information really helps us when we're trying to mitigate, especially against vessel strikes to whales. And I just want to show you this little area right here where you see all these little dots. That was actually two fin whales that were traveling in the area the same day. And they were quite vocal. And each one of these little dots is when they would send out their particular call type. This over here is humpback whales. This wasn't in the same day. It was a couple of days apart. But this was actually two humpback whales singing. So you can see all these little dots. You can see where these whales were. And then when you see these little X's along the shore, these were actually humpback whales bubble net feeding. So here you go, through acoustics, you can now document the actual behavior and the travel routes of whales through localization. So now what we're trying to do is we're trying to take that method and we're trying to move it down the coast so that all of the partners within the BC Hydrophone Network are also able to localize the pathways or the whale trails of the whales within their particular areas. I won't go into that yet. This is astounding. So I know when you look at it, I guess it doesn't look astounding, but let me describe to you what it actually is. So in the winter, these humpback whales start to sing. And this is a whale track or whale trail of one humpback whale that was singing. And this whale actually started at 1:48 a.m. And the whole time it sang for 5 hours. And in the 5 hours that it was singing, this was the travel route that it took. It actually traveled 14 kilometers during a 5-hour time while it was singing. But what's really kind of scary is this here is that tanker route that I was mentioning. So during the time that this whale was singing, especially in this region right here, which is probably about 3 hours, and if there had been a large tanker coming through here, the chances of that whale being struck are extremely high because, of course, these whales do need to come up to breathe. So even though the whale is singing below the surface, every 20 minutes or so, this whale needs to come up, take some breaths, and then goes back down and continues to sing. All right, now I'm going to get into some more very specific whale facts. So as I mentioned, I'm going to speak to you about orca, fin whales, and then really dive into humpback whales. So within BC, we have 3 ecotypes. We have the residents, which are the fish eaters, and then we have the bigs, which are the marine mammal hunters. So these are the whales that are hunting Dall's porpoises and dolphins, and at times other whales. And then we have another population referred to as offshores. And offshores are literally offshore. We really don't know very much about them because they are so offshore. It makes it difficult to study their culture. But offshores actually feed on sharks, which is highly unusual and very, very interesting. For right now, I'm just going to speak to the bigs, the marine mammal hunters, and the residents, which are the fish eaters. So whether you're speaking about northern residents or southern residents, these populations are broken up into clans, pods, and matrilines. I'm going to speak about the northern residents because up around Finn Island, those are the whales that we see most often. So a population of northern resident humpbacks is broken up into 3 clans. And within that clan, what that means is that they all will share some acoustic signature. So just by listening, you actually know which clan you're listening to. Within that clan, you'll have a number of pods. And within a pod, you're going to have a number of families. And that family actually will spend their entire life together. So within that family structure, which is a matriline, you're going to have the oldest female, and you're going to have all of her offspring, and you're going to have her offspring's offspring, and so on down the line. So you end up with generations within one family. The sons never leave their mother. They are with her until either the day she passes or the day that they pass. And so what that means is that because they have spent their entire life together, that acoustic dialect from the oldest female has been passed on to each generation. So each one of these matrilines and each one of these pods actually have their own acoustic signatures. So when we're listening with these hydrophones, right away we know what clan it is because it's very distinctive from clan to clan. We also know what pod it is. It's a little bit more difficult to tell one pod from the other because they're using the same call types, but they have a little bit of what we call like an accent that goes with it. So we can tell the difference. It just takes a little while to train your ear to be able to do that. And then within these pods, you have a matriline, and that's the actual family. Every member of the family to our ears sounds exactly the same. We can't tell you which whale is vocalizing, but they do have particular call types that only that family will use. So that's why these hydrophones are so highly effective. So what that means is if you have a family coming through and they're vocal, you know which clan, you know which pod, you know which matriline, you know how many whales are actually in the area. And that is the same structure with the southern residents. So what I want to do is play some whale calls for you. And these will be northern residents. I'm going to play some calls from different clans. And for some of you, I don't know, you might be able to tell the difference. It took me a while to figure it out. But the more that you listen to it, you might be able to pick it up right away that they do sound quite different. So I'll start with this one. And I just put that in there because that's what boat noise sounds like. So you can now understand that when these whales are trying to communicate with each other, that their ability to communicate can definitely be masked by the sound of a large vessel. Here's another recording. And I'm just going to do one more. That whale was very close to the hydrophone. I just want to quickly note as well about northern residents. So as I mentioned, the sons stay with their mother. So the big question years ago was, well, if the sons are staying with the mother, how is mating happening or occurring? And what we now know is that throughout different times of the year, these whales will have what we call large clan meetings. And during that time, if you put a hydrophone down in the water, all you hear is just all these different call types all at once. And what we now realize is that they're listening for a partner that sounds nothing like they do. Because if you don't sound like me, I'm not related to you. So they never mate within a clan, they always mate outside with a different clan. And the other thing we now know through genetic work that's been done is it's only the oldest males that are the fathers. But at the end of these clan meetings, everybody goes back to mom and they go on their way. So it's a very interesting culture. And I could talk about resident orcas and big orcas for hours, so I'm just going to give you the best stuff that I think the stuff that speaks to us the most as we go through this. So of course the other orca out there is the Biggs orca, and I think anyone that's been on the water recognizes that this population is growing. It's very healthy. They are doing really well. The northern residents are doing very well. Of course, we know the southern residents are not doing very well. Their population is quite minimal and they are in trouble. They are doing a little bit better here and there. But the bigs, they are doing really well. They have a large food source. They're going after seals, sea lions, Dall's porpoises, and as I mentioned, sometimes other whales. Now, because they're hunters, they tend to travel in silence. So what that means is that opportunity for them to pass on that acoustic dialect has been somewhat lost. They're still vocal. They tend to be very vocal once they make a kill. They're always chatty while they're eating. But what's happened is that they don't have this huge variety of calls that they use. So when we hear a transient call or a Biggs call, we don't know what family it is. And all we know is that they are transients and not residents. So I'm just going to play that for you. It sounds very different than the residents. You can see my screen and you can see that orca and all those sea lions trying to get out of the water. Perfect. All right. Well, that's just an example. So I want to make sure what was heard though, because it is really interesting, is that when, for example, sea lions, Dall's porpoises, when they hear the call of Biggs or transient orcas, they immediately just get out of the water or get away as fast as they can. But if these sea lions hear a resident orca, they don't move. They know they're perfectly safe. And sometimes they'll even almost hang out with them because they know they're safe while they're in the presence of residents. So for ourselves, it actually helps us to be able to ID which whale we have in that particular area. So I think with that, I'm going to jump into humpback whales, just because we had a little minute there of, I guess, an intermission. So now I get to talk about humpback whales. And this particular picture here was actually taken right from shore of that Finn Island station close to Hartley Bay. And again, just emphasizing one of the reasons we built that station there is that these whales come by so close to shore that we can do all of our ID work and everything that we need to do just by being on land, because we're right within their particular habitat. Humpback whales are a whale that migrate. So these whales do leave our coastline usually by November, December. They're all then migrating towards either Hawaii or down to the Baja in Mexico. Some are actually going to Japan. So they're leaving the coast of British Columbia. They're going to Hawaii or the Baja to calve and as well for breeding purposes. Almost probably starting pretty quick here, but by April, we'll start to see some humpback whales. They're then traveling back to the coast of BC. And then by summer, of course, the whole coastline is talking about humpback whales because that population has just increased dramatically over the years. The reason that they are coming to our particular coast is we are their feeding grounds. They are coming to the coast of BC to forage. When they're in Hawaii or Mexico, they're actually not feeding. So that's really something to think about, that they're going for a long period of time of not having any food. Every whale that comes into the area is being photographed. So up at the Finn Island station, every whale that goes by the station or that we view on a marine survey, we take a photograph of their underside of their fluke. So when they dive, they dive and that beautiful tail comes up and we take that photograph. So this is our way of identifying every single whale along the coast of BC. So because we've been doing this for years, we now realize that certain whales are going to certain parts of the coast. So many of these whales that you see in this picture here are whales that we've now been documenting for over 20 years. They just keep coming back to the same place, and the same thing is happening all along the coast. So if you go from here, I mean, sorry, not from here, if you go from the Finn Island station, we now have a population of well over 500 humpback whales. We started off with 80, so the population has really grown. And then, of course, where you are, that population has just exploded, especially in the last 5 years. I don't even know if you can go out on the water and not see a humpback whale. This population is recovering, and this population is doing extremely well. But they have homes, they have areas they're very, very resident to for a portion of the year. Mothers and calves. So unlike orca, these humpback whales do not stay in these strong family groups. What happens is when a female humpback gives birth to a baby calf, that calf only has 1 year with its mom. So within 1 year, that mother needs to teach that little calf absolutely everything that it needs to learn. So when they come to the coast of BC, of course, what they need to teach that little calf is how to survive on your own and how to find food, as well how to develop social bonds. So I'm just going to play you this little video, and at first you're just going to see the calf and with its mom. And when mother and calf are together, they are together. That calf is always beside its mom, under its mom. Mom goes down to dive, it goes down to dive. Mom comes up, little calf comes up. Sometimes little calf comes up before mom because it doesn't have the lung capacity of its mom while mother is down below foraging. But as you watch this video here, and you can see this little calf, it's still pretty small actually. They grow a lot when they arrive in BC, but you notice over to the right here, you're starting to see this other whale. And this whale is what we refer to as an escort. And a lot of times people would think that this escort whale must be a male, but what we're really realizing, at least on the feeding grounds, is a lot of times this other whale, this escort, is actually a young female. And perhaps that female is learning from the other female how to be a mother, because they're not staying in those family groups. And we don't quite understand how is that information being passed on. How do they learn to be a mother? So perhaps these escort groups are one of the components that enable them to figure that out and to learn from each other. Yeah. Very gentle, moving so slowly, but that little calf is still right underneath mom over here, which is pretty incredible. You can just see the little tail there. Yeah. So as I mentioned, one of the main reasons they are coming to the coast of BC is this is where the food is. This is what's bringing them to the coast of BC, is the abundance of herring and krill and all of these small schooling fish. Humpbacks only will eat small fish. They don't eat large fish like the residents do. They have a number of different foraging strategies. So over to the left here, you can see this is trap feeding, which we see in around Alert Bay, Johnson Strait area. And then this is very typical. This is a lunge feed of a humpback whale here. A lot of times whales also will feed subsurface, so we don't actually see the feeding technique. But the technique that we see the most often up north is what we refer to as bubble net feeding. And it's pretty incredible to observe. Usually these humpback whales will bubble net feed in groups of 2 all the way up to 15. So they are cooperating while they're feeding. And what they'll do is they'll dive down one after the other. They'll go down about 100 meters. And when they get down to that depth, what they've done is they've gone down underneath a school of herring, and they'll start to blow bubbles, hence the name bubble net feeding. And while they're blowing these bubbles, they'll actually travel in this circular motion. And what they're doing is they're actually forming a bubble net. And what you'll end up with a large group is you'll have some whales that are blowing these bubbles and traveling up. And of course, what bubbles do is they rise to the surface. So these bubbles are bringing the herring all the way up to the surface. But what's also happening underneath this bubble net is you'll have 1 or 2 humpback whales that will do what we call a bubble net feeding call. And they only make this call when they're bubble netting. So of course, we're documenting that with the hydrophones. So when we hear that call, we can now put a behavior and we actually know that they're foraging. And I'll just play you a little example of this call. It's kind of interesting to listen to. It's some people don't like it. I think it sounds great. You can hear the bubbles now because everything's coming to the surface. And they just broke the surface. So that was live. That's actually how long you would hear the call for. Sometimes it goes on for a couple of minutes, especially when you have a large group. So with this video, you can see here's the Finn Island station. So we're listening to these calls in real time. We know these whales are bubble net feeding. We know that they are going to suddenly come up to the surface at some point. So what we've done is we've put the drone in the air, and you can just see the beginning. This is the actual circle. So it is a big circle of bubbles that you're going to see. And this is what will happen as soon as they break the surface. All these large gaping mouths breaking the surface at once. And you can even in this video, if you zoomed in, you can actually see all these little herring jumping for their life. And this was probably a group of about 10 humpback whales. And they will bubble net feed all day long. So there's days that's all we listen to all day is that bubble net feeding call. And as they go by the station, we have the opportunity. We're going to get a photo ID of each one of these whales. We're going to get some body imaging going on with some of these whales because we're going to follow them now as they travel, maybe for 1 or 2 minutes, and then they're going to dive again, and then it just repeats over and over. And again, this is why the drone is so effective. You can see now these whales are breaking apart from each other, but they are going and forming. It's a very strategic formation that they're about to go into, and what we've noticed is it gets repeated over and over. We also know by the dive sequence, we can now tell that certain whales have certain roles. We don't know what those roles are now, of course, because it's all happening underwater, but we're very slowly putting all these little puzzle pieces together. But I have to tell you that just watching a group of 10 whales traveling together like this and working together and cooperating so that everyone is getting a good mouthful is, yeah, it's pretty remarkable and inspirational. And these particular whales that we've been documenting for over 20 years now, every year, same time of the year, same whales are coming together and they're foraging together. So there's some really strong bonds that have developed between a lot of these whales. Yeah, and it's too bad with a drone you can't hear the blow because as well, when you're experience this in real time and you've got that many humpback whales, these blows are just so loud. It's a pretty incredible, it's an incredible event to see. I know that down in the Cetacea, they're starting to see humpback whales bubble net feed. A lot of humpback whales are actually solo bubble net feeding, which is also extremely interesting. One of the things that we've documented up in Gitga'at territory is that back in 2004, we had some whales that would feed together, but we started to notice as the years went by that more and more humpback whales were bubble net feeding. And what we recognized that this particular feeding strategy is being passed on within a population. So we started down here with about 18 humpback whales that will bubble net feed. Now within our population, there's over 200 whales that are now bubble net feeding, and they're learning that strategy from one another, which is pretty incredible. But also now what's happening is these large bubble net feeding groups are starting to form down the coast. So some of these whales are actually traveling down in towards Clentu, Bala Bala, and further south. So this technique is growing along the whole coast. So we're calling it a wave of bubble net feeding. So here we go. We've got all this great cooperation going on with humpbacks bubble net feeding, but as we get into the fall, this cooperation starts to break down a little bit. And that's because now you're starting to get into a bit of male competition for the females. And that's where this song display comes in. So only the male humpback whale will sing these long, beautiful songs. But as they're working towards this song display, we also start to hear all of this chatter underwater, all these beautiful social calls of humpback whales. And so what I'd like to do is just play you a variety of these social calls. They're quite different. And then I'll play some of the song for you. And you can see that while they're having all these, these nights of social activity, there's a little bit of learning going on, and they're starting to play with some of these call types and then playing. It's almost like practicing a song or, tuning a guitar. And then eventually all this acoustic social activity dives into an actual song. And I'll describe the song before I play it. But right now, I just want to play you some of these social calls. Some of them are a little bit, well, I think they're a little bit goofy, but they're pretty cute. That's a really common, that moop. We hear that all the time. It's probably the most distinct and most repetitive call type. And each one of these calls has a number and a name to it. And these social calls are being documented along the entire coast of BC now. And that sounds a lot like an elephant. I think it's even called the elephant call. So as I said, you're getting a lot of this social activity, but then it starts to take form, and they do start to sing these long, beautiful songs. So like I mentioned, that one song that lasted 5 hours, which might be a record. Normally they last anywhere, a song actually lasts anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. This male was very, very active that one particular night. And we're really working on the humpback whale song, trying to understand the meaning of it, the purpose of it. Years ago, everyone just said, oh, they must be singing to attract females. Now what we recognize is that when these males are singing, it actually attracts other males. And then you end up with these male singing groups. So you have 2 or 3 humpback whales singing together. And then you might have another humpback whale that comes along and tries to sing with that group. And they're like, no, you're not singing with us. So one of the theories out there is that male humpback whales that are singing together may be somewhat related to each other. So they sing together, and then they'll travel as a group towards a female, and then whoever gets to mate with the female, at least someone within the family is passing on their genes onto the next generation. So that's one of the theories that's out there that people are working on, which is pretty interesting. When you listen to the humpback whale song, it is a song. What you'll hear is a number of different themes and phrases, and then it all comes together. The whale will then start to sing the same song. So he's repeating the same themes, repeating the same phrases, and then he's repeating the same song. Throughout the season, this song actually changes and evolves. And what will happen is every male within the Pacific population will be singing somewhat the same version of that song for that year. And then next year, as that song changes, again, all of these males will add that same change to their song. So as the song is changing and evolving, somehow or other, those changes are being communicated between thousands of humpback whales as they leave the coast of BC, They're going to Mexico, they're going to Hawaii, they're taking those changes with them, and it's being passed on. And we don't quite know A, how that's happening, or B, how are they agreeing on those changes. So it's one of these big, beautiful mysteries. We're trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. We do believe that the coast of BC is like a practice ground. And we do believe that because you have large aggregations of whales together that know each other because they've been associating for years on end, that the BC coast might be an area where those changes are being decided upon in whale language. So what I want to do now is just play a couple of humpback whale songs. I won't play the whole song, but if anyone's interested, we can send you these entire songs. The first one I'm going to play was recorded up at Finn Island last winter. And the reason that I wanted to play this one is because there's these beautiful echoes that happen. And what we've realized with some of these whales is that when they sing and there's an echo, sometimes they'll actually do a call, the echo comes back to them and they'll do it again. That doesn't happen in this recording, but you can really hear how these calls can echo through the underwater soundscape. And then I just want to play one more for you. So I was just thinking it would be really a miracle to really understand when they're singing, what is it that they're trying to communicate. And some of the songs that we've heard too, I mean, so that one to me, I mean, that just touches my heart. We've heard other songs that are a bit more chaotic and all over the place, but it's the diversity and their ability sometimes to go from very, very high to very, very low. They have an incredible range in regards to the different frequencies in which they're able to communicate with each other. And this song display that we refer to, it can travel for a very long distance underwater. So they're able to communicate at very long distances. So sometimes when we look at a group of whales and they may be even half a kilometer apart and we think, oh, well, they're not really connected, but through the ocean they actually are, because they're connected through sound, which I think is a really important thing to remember. So, throughout they start to sing generally August, September. So in around the Cetacea, they are singing. There's a lot of beautiful recordings that are happening, and I think pretty soon there will also be a lot of opportunity to listen to this live. And when that happens, we can always reach out and let you know what website or where you can go if you're interested in listening to humpback whales sing in real, like actually knowing that it's happening in real time is pretty impressive. All right, I'm just going to go on. I just have a couple more slides. I just want to share a few other little tidbits with you. I don't need to go into this a little bit, but I just thought that after playing that beautiful humpback whale song, again, you can understand that if you interrupt that with vessel noise, it really does have a large impact on their ability to communicate, but also when they're singing, because they are singing to be heard. Humpback whales are not just singing, I'm sure they enjoy it, but they are singing to be heard. There's a real purpose to it. So this vessel noise could truly have an impact on their ability to be heard, but as well the actual purpose, which is to find a mate, so the population can continue to recover. I love this picture. This is real. This is actually a humpback and a Biggs orca. And I don't know if anyone in the audience here has heard stories about this, but what's been happening along the coast as the humpback population grew and the Biggs, the marine mammal hunting orca population grew, is that sometimes when these Biggs go in to, especially if they're making a kill on sea lions, these humpbacks will actually go in and charge into the situation. They try to break it up. There's a lot of people, oh, they're trying to save the sea lion. Perhaps they are. And when you see the next video, you might think it's true. But it is very interesting. These humpback whales do not like Biggs orca being in their territory, and they will come in, and this happens quite often. So this picture is real. This humpback whale was literally charging towards an orca, and there were about 4 or 5 humpback whales during this incident, and these orca did leave. So it's just a little interesting situation that's happening along the coast of British Columbia. This video is pretty interesting. This is something we started seeing back in 2006. And this is a relationship that's again developing along the whole coast of BC, where humpbacks and fin whales are literally playing with each other. I'm going to make my screen a bit brighter to make sure you can see it. This went on for about an hour. Lots of times we'll have a mother with a calf, and sea lions will show up, and they are rolling over each other and really looks like they're having fun. It's like a play date of some sort. And we've documented this so often now that we're just, we're quite convinced that there is definitely a relationship of some sort that is developing between humpback whales and sea lions. And as well, when these sea lions are hanging out with that large humpback whale, they know they're safe, because there's no way that a Biggs orca is going to get in the way of that moment. This was also an interesting picture that we took a few years ago. This is actually a fin whale swimming with a group of northern resident orcas. And if that fin whale had made the mistake of swimming with a family of Biggs orca, that whale would have been killed. So again, this whale knew, hey, these are resident orcas, I'm safe. And this fin whale traveled with this group for about 2 hours. We've actually documented it happening twice now. We're not sure why, but it's certainly interesting to observe. So I think really what I'm trying to get at as I'm talking about whales is there is so much culture when it comes to whales. There's so much that we don't know. There's so much that we're learning. But the one thing that we know for sure is that they have very, very strong bonds with each other, whether it's through family or through bonds that they develop as adults, if you're a humpback whale and as well as a fin whale. and that they are a very socially driven whale. But the biggest thing of all is that they are dependent on sound. Sound is what makes their lives what it is. That is the world with that they live in. So I think if you are a boat driver, I just always say, just remember that your vessel, it can have an impact on their ability to do what they need to do. And one of the projects that we're working towards is finding quiet zones along the coast of BC with that BC hydrophone network. And if we can find those quiet zones, maybe then we can try to protect at least those areas. So there are still areas along the coast that are quiet underwater and are as they were hundreds or thousands of years ago. I just want to say that the work that we do would not be possible with so many people, so many funders, but also all the interns and all the people that come to visit us and help us make the work possible. And we're just extremely grateful. And also talking to people like yourselves, it really does make a difference to be able to share what we've learned so far. And I've truly just touched the surface. But I hope it was enough that if you haven't had a whale encounter, that you're kind of like, oh yeah, I think I'd like to learn more about these incredible beings that we share this planet with. And if you want to find out more, you can go to our website, which is bcwhales.org. Or if you're interested in the BC Hydrophone Network, we're just developing another website called Whale Sound. And thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Janie. That was absolutely awesome. Again, I can completely understand how at 9 years old you just went, this is wonderful. I need to learn more about these creatures because a really, really amazing presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Little heart symbols and stuff come up, and in the comments, people were just talking about how amazing the sounds were and so on. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. We will open it up to questions. So I think by now probably Deb has allowed you to unmute yourself and just show your screen. And looks like
May I ask a question?
Hi, it's Jennifer here. If we could maybe take the calls from the chat first, and then we can open questions for people who haven't asked in the chat. Is that okay? We'll get back to everybody.
Yep.
So the first one is it was during the bubble netting session. There was a question about if all those humpbacks were female.
No, they were a mix of male and female. Good question. I haven't been asked that one before. No, it was a mixture. Good one. Males and females bubble net feeding together.
And you can tell that from the drone. They turn over. Obviously, they have to turn over at some point.
Yeah, no, we can't tell with the drone. The way that we can tell is through all that genetic work, through that blow sampling that we were doing. We were able to sex all of the whales, and that's when we realized that the males and the females are bubble net feeding together.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
There's also, my understanding is that the calls or songs are created using the blowhole. Has there been any research on specifically how the different songs are made?
Yeah, so no, I won't share it. I have a slide. No, I won't do that. Sorry. Okay, I'll try to describe it without a visual aid. So what happens is when you go into the blowhole of a whale, if you go down into the blowhole and you go down a little way, so if you think about our nasal cavities, what they do within their nasal cavities is they have a mechanism that allows them to bring in that air. So they have a big inhale, they go underwater, and they're going to be moving air back and forth through their nasal cavities and through what is like a larynx, and that is causing a vibration. And that movement is actually then with muscles is causing it to make sound. So the only analogy I can make, if you could take a balloon and you kept the air in the balloon, and you were to move it around and you had some vocal cords in there with that air going back and forth, that's actually making those sounds. And I wish I had a slide because I don't know if I did that justice. If somebody wants to, whoever asked the question, if you send me an email, there was actually a beautiful paper just published that's actually readable, that describes it really, really well, and I could send it to you because without visual aids, it's hard for me to describe it. But it's different than us. They don't have vocal cords like we do. It's the passage of air, muscles contracting. So their whole nasal cavity is actually developed to produce sound.
And Murray also wanted to know if he can get some whale songs or calls, as
Absolutely.
did Indigo. She was interested.
Yes, please just send me an email and I will send you some whale sounds.
Murray also wanted to know, can you hear the songs or calls when you're out of the water?
So if you're in a boat and the whales are close, it could come through the hull of your boat, especially if you have a wooden boat. But no, if you're just standing on land, you will not hear those calls unless you're underwater. If you're in the water, you would hear them with your ears.
Right. Let's see. Thank you for the president. So Uwe wants to know, what is worse for whales? Noise of many smaller boats or noise of larger vessels?
Oh, that's such a great question. Well, we don't know the exact answer, but what we do know is that if there's multiple sound sources all over the place, it's a little bit more confusing. Whereas if it's one steady sound, it is probably easier for that whale to determine where the vessel is, but multiple sounds everywhere is a bit more confusing for them, and multiple boats everywhere, especially if there's small speed boats, it's it's a bit more disruptive, but the noise level of a large vessel is louder. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And then the secondary question, how do you see vessel-based whale watching from a conservation point of view?
Yeah, again, a very good question. I do think it's important for people to be able to connect with whales because that's what inspires conservation and a need to protect them. And I think that a lot of whale watching companies are actually behaving better around whales. There's the guidelines in there that are keeping vessels at quite a distance. And I think most of the public respect those guidelines and want to, abide by those guidelines. And when you're in an area where there's not a lot of vessel traffic and you see whales, it's like, oh, it must be such a relief for them. But I do think they've adapted to it to some degree. And I do think it's important that people have the ability to see whales as long as it's done with respect and at a distance.
Right. And AI is coming into this now. Are you using or have you considered using AI to try and decipher whale communication?
Yes, I think AI will change things. Already, already we're using AI that is able to go through like large databases of acoustic data and draw out, like just pick out the actual whale calls, which is a huge leap forward. And I do think that with AI, we might get a bit closer. I don't know. I'd love in my lifetime to actually understand what these whales are saying. But at the same time, they're almost like an alien species because they've evolved in an aquatic environment and they communicate their culture. Everything about them is so incredibly different than ourselves. It'll be a long time before we figure it out, but hey, wouldn't that be something?
Carolyn's wondering if you're going to need to possibly move your observation position due to the LNG traffic patterns.
We are going to stay right where we are because
Good.
it is, yeah, no, we're not moving. Probably, as heart-wrenching as it is, because it is, but it is one of the first times that you're going to be able to document such a dramatic change in whale habitat in regards to a sudden increase in noise and as well as sudden increase of large vessels going through. So we're going to document every change we can so that it can be used for mitigation purposes around the world as a case study. Yeah.
Ellen's question was what anatomy is involved in sounds, but I think maybe that's been answered. Has it, Ellen? Are you satisfied with the answer you got? You might have to unmute yourself. Oh, okay.
If not, please email me and I can send you a couple of photographs and give it justice. But you really do need to see the picture, and I'll give a little write-up for you just to describe it better.
Right. Dawn Forsyth this is from Elizabeth. Don Forsyth says that ships will eventually have electric engines, which should reduce the sound they make, hopefully by mid-century.
Yes, and there's been a lot of work actually done, especially with large vessels, and there's even props that are available for smaller vessels that do not make as much noise. So they are working towards vessels being quieter. You want that vessel to make a little bit of noise because you do want that whale to know that there is a vessel, but there is a lot of movement and a lot of funding going towards changing props so that they don't make so much noise.
Great.
Yeah, it's
So
great.
now maybe we'll go to the people who are asking online. So Denis, you need to unmute. Good, there you go.
Yeah, it was actually Teresa.
Oh,
So
hi.
when you were saying that the males who were together and singing together, that there's evidence that they're probably related. I'm wondering, do these groups form, like, do they form when they're still down south, and do they stay together when they're migrating? Or do the groups, whether they're singing groups or feeding groups, do they form while they're on the coast? And are they sort of stable for a season, or do they constantly change except for when they're singing together? And how do they know that they're related
Yeah.
if there isn't a vocal language?
Yeah, I'm gonna work backwards on that one. I mean, that is a great, we don't know how they know. I mean, maybe it's like through acoustics. Maybe that's how they would know. I mean, that is such a great question. And we don't know for sure that they are related. They're just starting to do the genetic work to see if there's some truth to that. So there's that part to it. When they form these singing groups, they can form multiple singing groups, and a singing group may not be consistent throughout a whole season. A lot of these singing groups have been documented more in Hawaii and Mexico. We do have some documentation of singing groups in BC, but this is more happening with researchers down in the tropics there with Mexico, Hawaii area. Was there another one? I can't remember. There was.
Oh, the question, like the groups that are like traveling, bubble net feeding, whatever,
Oh,
do
yeah.
they tend to stay together for a season, or is that just a kind of a constantly changing, you just acoustically get together with happens to be in the neighborhood, and does some of them cover like a lot more ground in a season or a week than other whales?
Yeah, so the bubble netters stick together. So we see the same bubble netters feeding with each other over and over. So that group composition doesn't change a lot. They may go off and feed with some other groups, but they always come back to each other. They will take that bubble net feeding behavior, it's feeding with the same whales over and over. They can travel for miles and miles doing that.
And then the next season, would the same group likely be together?
Yep. Yeah. It's
Oh.
but again I'd say for the first 10 years it was always the same. We just call them the usual suspects. It's always the same whales. They were always bubble net feeding together. But as more whales are learning this behavior, some of the whales from that main group may go off with another group and feed with them, but they always come back to that main group. That's how that is being culturally transmitted to other whales within that population. Yeah. So it is changing a little bit. I will say that my answer to that is beginning to change because they're changing. Yeah.
So Indigo, you have a question? You need to unmute yourself. There you go.
I was just about to do that. So just to back up, what was it called? Bubble feeding? That's what it's called.
Oh, bubble net feeding? Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I asked the question about if they're all females. So I get that they're reuniting, I guess, when they're feeding here on the North Pacific coast, I guess. Is that right?
That's right.
Do you think, or do you know, or could you know that are they mating if they're both sexes? Do you think that they're couples?
We don't think they are. No, we don't
No?
think they are. And we've tried to do a lot of like this DNA testing that we've been doing. It's hard for us to get a blow sample when there's a large group. So
Right.
we opportunistically are trying to get individuals that are a part of the bubble net feeding group to see if they're related to each other. We don't have the answer yet, but a lot of those samples are still being tested, so we don't know if they're related to each other or not. We don't know if they're mating with each other either. So maybe if you ask me in a year, I hope I have an answer to that, because that is one of the projects we're working quite strongly on, and that's one of the main questions we're trying to get between the bubble netters and the genetic work that we're doing.
Do they appear to be the same age group?
No, they're different ages. They're definitely different sizes. Yeah.
Okay, and then the other question I had, you've spoken about the different orcas and the humpbacks. There's other, are those the main two whales that exist in the Pacific coast here?
There's gray whales as well, but they tend to be more on the outer coast. The odd time we will see a gray whale, but it doesn't happen very often. And then if you go a little bit further off the coast of BC, more towards Haida Gwaii, that's where you'll see blue whales once in a while. You'll see sperm whales. You've got minke whales. We don't have a huge population of minkies, but there are minke whales along the coast of BC, orca, humpbacks. There was one right whale sighted, which was just, everyone was like, oh my gosh, but that was only that one time. So those are the main whales that you'll see off the coast of BC. And dolphins and dulse porpoises, of course, and harbor porpoises or porpoise.
Harbor horses?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what
Yes.
those are.
No, harbor porpoises.
Porpoise.
Porpoises.
It was
Okay,
probably me.
that's okay.
Okay, so Murray,
just
do you
one
have a
last-
question
one
now?
one last question.
Yeah, just actually,
Can I just finish? Just one last question, really quick.
Dawn had a question here as well, but
I just wanted to ask, there seems to be more study along whales and dolphins or sharks, not so much porpoises. Is there a reason for that?
I think there's a lot of younger researchers right now that are starting to study dulse porpoises and harbor porpoises. Historically, it's just a little bit more difficult, but I think there are some. I know down in the Slater Sea, there's definitely some work that's beginning. But you're right. I'm not sure why,
Okay.
but I do know it's a lot more difficult because they travel in those large groups. It's hard to do the identification work. That's the only reason that I can think of, but I don't know why. Actually, it's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Murray, away you go.
yeah, just one. So, what is with the bubble net feeding? What is the purpose of the vocalizations of the
Yeah.
down below?
Yeah, thank you. I should have mentioned that. So, what happens is when those whales start to vocalize, the herring, what they do is they bunch up into a tighter group. They literally get so scared, they go into a tighter group, which is even better for the whales in regards to feeding on them. And there was actually a study done in the lab where they would play that bubble net feeding call on the herring. That's exactly what they did. They bunched up.
So, I wonder why.
And it also forces them further into that bubble net, right? So they get scared, they bunch up, and they start to it just forms more of a ball of food.
So it sounds like it's more just an association. The herring somehow pick up the association between the call and the bubble netting itself somehow.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So we have another question in the chat. Do males have lower frequency than females, or can we tell the difference? Or can we not tell the difference?
I don't think so. We don't know if I can't say with 100% certainty on that. But as far as we know, females are vocal. They do not sing though. So, it's hard to say for sure, but as far as we know, they have the same ability and the same vocal range as males. But they don't sing, so it's a good question. One that we don't know the answer to 100%.
So we've got another bubble net feeding question, wondering if it's unique to BC and the Salish Sea or the Northern Hemisphere. They recently went to Antarctica, and one of the whale experts on the ship told us that it appears bubble net feeding may have passed down to the Southern Hemisphere.
Yes, that's true, and it's not documented everywhere, but definitely along up towards Alaska was the first place, North Coast, slowly making its way down south, and on the Atlantic side there is some bubble net feeding that's going on as well of Canada and the United States.
Okay, and do females with calves stay mainly with just an escort, or are they also feeding with bigger ground? bigger groups, I think they mean.
Yeah, so
What percentage of whales bubble feed, and can you describe other types of feeding?
yes, so I'll start with the first question. So females will bubble net feed in large groups and their calf just hangs off to the side. So a lot of these that within that big bubble net feeding group that I was speaking to, there are a number of females in there that have many calves over the years. So sometimes you might even have two calves off to the side. So yes, they do associate in these bubble net feeding groups. If a female is not a big bubble net feeder, like not a whale that we've ever seen bubble net, they either are on their own or with an escort, but they don't usually travel in big groups for whatever reason. It's a very interesting documentation. I think it's because they're so focused on the calf, all their energy is going into that and not so much into developing some of these social bonds. We think the males may be developing more of these social bonds than the females just for that reason. But again, we don't have that 100% proven, but it's looking like that. Yeah. What was the other part of the question?
What percentage of whales bubble feed?
Well, within our population, up to 50% are bubble net feeding.
Okay. And they asked you to describe the other types
Oh,
of feeding,
yeah,
although
okay.
you showed the pictures before.
That's right. So when they're feeding on krill, a lot of the times they'll just come to the surface and their massive mouth is open and we call it lunge feeding, and they're literally skimming the surface and just grabbing the krill. They also will feed at depth on krill, and it hasn't been really well documented. We know that they're feeding down there because of people putting data loggers on these whales, which is not something I would personally do, but you can put a data logger on a whale. The whale dives down, and when it goes down, from looking at the data logger data, it looks like they turn and they gulp, gulp, gulp at depth. So they get down to where there's a layer of herring or krill, gulp, 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 come up, take a breath, and go back down, gulp, gulp, gulp when they're feeding at depth. The trap feeding is very interesting. They get into a current and they literally have their mouth open at the surface like this. So they're just like this and they're just letting the current bring the fish to them. And when they feel that their mouth is full, they'll close it, they'll swallow, and then they get back up in the current and they just open their mouth. It's pretty incredible to observe. Those are the main foraging techniques we see. But another one is called tail flicking or peck feeding. But tail flicking is, you'll see just on the surface, you see all this splashing. And so that big fluke is just cutting through the surface, and then they'll lunge through whatever it is that they just knocked out, I guess. Yeah.
I had one question about the Biggs whales. They're known to take baby humpbacks. Is there a lot of predation on the babies up here by the Biggs?
Yeah, they're not successful with a humpback very often, but we do see babies. Sometimes they have all these rake marks on their fluke, so we know that they've had a humpback, a Biggs encounter. But these female humpback whales, they are fighters. They can put up a pretty big fight. Gray whales, on the other hand, are much more susceptible to a Biggs attack. They don't have the same ability to fight. So you might notice with humpback whales, they have those huge long pectorals and a really strong fluke tail. But between those two, and their bodies are very bendy, they can really fight back. And the Biggs know it and tend to leave them alone. They have to be pretty hungry to go after a humpback's calf.
Well, that's fantastic. We've had some amazing questions. Are there any more? I think that's it. One more? No, we're good. Thank you very much.
Oh, that was great. Thank you. Great questions. Truly, some I haven't had before. I love
Fantastic.
that.
Yeah.
And some I can't answer, but that's just the way it is with whales.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, and everybody who joined in tonight as well. I think you were probably all amazed with all those sounds. And remember to come out in person next month. And, these whales that Janie has talked about, particularly like the humpbacks, they're going to have trouble in the future if we're not protecting the ocean. And that ocean acidification is a big, big issue, especially for some of their food sources. So come out and learn about that and join us in person there. Well, Thank you, everybody. And I think we're probably ready to leave the meeting. So thanks for joining us and
Thank
enjoy
you.
the rest of
Good
your
night,
evening.
Thank you,
everybody.
Janie.
Thank you.
Thank you
Take
very
care.
much. Wonderful
Bye-bye.
talk.